So today we're going to talk about ethics and legal issues related to healthcare. It's important that you pay very good attention to this and learn from this lesson in order to avoid getting into trouble. So the first two things that we have to distinguish here is the difference between ethics and laws. Ethics are what we believe to be right and wrong. Generally that's governed by your parents, by society, can come from your church, from your school. People change as they encounter different situations. Laws tell us what the government, state, federal, and local governments say we can and cannot do. Again, a lot of these are based on ethics and will change from time to time, but they are an important thing to be aware of when you're practicing healthcare. Laws and ethics, like I said in the previous slide, are very different. We're concerned about healthcare and how laws and ethics govern us. I'm not going to read through all of these. You know what is right and what is wrong. You're not supposed to take things. You're not supposed to abuse your patients. You're supposed to follow laws. You're supposed to follow the care plan. You're supposed to stay inside of your scope of practice. And so it's really important to work according to the code of conduct. Make sure that you're aware of policies and procedures from your agency that you're working with and stay within those boundaries. You can get into big trouble if you do things against the law and break rules. It's important for you to maintain strict boundaries and that you stay on the professional side. The easiest way to get into trouble is to relax those boundaries and do things that you're not supposed to, and then you can get into big trouble. The big word here is professionalism. You have to act and remember that you are at work at all times. Do not cross boundaries. Don't share information, and do what you are supposed to do. Patients have many rights. You can access Patient Bill of Rights anytime that you want. Usually part of the orientation when you are a new employee at a facility or an agency is to go through the Patient Bill of Rights. So patients have some basic rights. They have the right to privacy. They have the right to confidentiality. They have the right to be treated with respect and dignity. They have the right to have you do what you're supposed to do and do an honest day's work. They have the right to be treated kindly and nicely, and not just that you're not just there to collect a paycheck. Among those rights are some here that are kind of important. Make sure that you follow the care plan, that the patient is involved in making the care plan. Make sure that you are aware of the patient's wishes that come from an advance directive. Don't treat patients differently based on their race, sex, religion, sexual preferences. Make sure that you keep their information private. And that you follow the agency policy about releasing information. In addition, you need to make sure that the patient or that you provide information to the patient when requested, or find a way to make it available to them about how the bill is getting paid, and that their source of funding is covering your care. One of the biggest and most important things that you need to be aware of is what to do in case of an emergency. The patient has the right to be aware of that as well. I've talked a lot about what else is on this slide, but having an emergency plan and knowing what will happen in an emergency situation is important. The patient also needs to be aware of what resources are available to them to make sure that they get the care that they need. We've said this lots and I'm going to repeat it again. It's important that you follow doctor's orders. No care should be done unless you have a doctor's order for it. The people who are carrying out those orders must be trained appropriately. Whether it's a nurse, a doctor, a home health aide, or anyone else in the home, they have to have a doctor's order in order to perform the care, and they have to be properly trained. In addition, the patient has some responsibilities. They have to notify the agency that there's a change in condition. It's important that they be aware of following the care plan as well, not have you do things outside of it. If they need times change for the visits, they have to let you know. They have to let you know if there's any changes in the advance directives. In addition, the patient should tell the agency if they're unhappy with their care, file complaints. They need to make sure that the environment that you're working in is safe and that they meet these responsibilities. A lot of times patients may or may not follow these policies, and it's important to avoid trouble to follow them. So abuse is super important here. And abuse or neglect means that you physically or mentally harm a person emotionally by failing to provide them care or not doing what you're supposed to. Active neglect means that you intentionally do something to cause harm to the patient by not providing them care. Passive neglect means that you just did it without intending to, but the harm still occurred. There's really no difference as to what consequences can happen as a result of neglect, but you have to be careful to avoid it, so you need to do what you're supposed to do. So negligence, again, like I said, is a failure to provide or act in the proper manner to care for a patient that causes an injury, either intended or unintended. Malpractice is when you choose not to follow doing things the way that you were taught, and injury comes to a patient as a result of not doing things the way that you were supposed to. There is no difference really as far as if you aren't doing things or you do it intentionally. The consequence is going to be the same, that you could lose your job, your certification, and the patient could be injured. So you have to be very careful when you're dealing with patients. If you don't want to be accused of abuse, then you have to manage how you deal with the patients very carefully. There's many different types of abuse, as you can see here. One documented case of abuse that is proven can end a career. So it is super important to manage yourself in a professional manner when you are dealing with patients. Don't hit them, don't take things that don't belong to you, and don't do things the way that you weren't taught to do them. Also, make sure that you do things that you say you're going to do. If you don't do these things, you can be accused of neglect. As I said in the previous couple slides ago, you can lose your career in healthcare and never work again if you are found to be guilty of abuse or neglect. There's many signs that you have to report as well. If you just ignore signs of abuse or neglect, then you can be found guilty of them as well as other people. So it's important for you to take care when you are dealing with patients. And if you see or suspect abuse or neglect, you need to report that right away to your supervisor. Do not wait, because if someone else observes the signs and reports and you haven't, then again, you will be have problems as well and could be found guilty of neglect. It is our job to act as an advocate for our patients and to look out for signs of abuse, neglect. You should, like I said in previous slides, you shouldn't abuse them yourself. You should treat them with dignity and respect. You should look for signs of abuse, and if you see them, report them to your supervisor. Make sure that the patient is aware of what's going on and they get involved in the care plan. And it is also important to do the best that you can when caring for the patients in order to avoid any problems and make sure that your patient is well taken care of. It is important to protect your patients' privacy of all medical and financial information. It is nobody's business but the people who are actually caring for the patient. If the patient chooses not to share the information with the family, that is well within their rights. You can get into a large amount of legal trouble if it's found out that you disclosed information properly. If you are going to disclose information, make sure that there is a written consent from the patient that allows you to give the information that the person is asking for. If you do not, you can lose money, be fined, face jail time. lose your license as or certification as CNA or a nurse. So it's important to be careful and maintain the patient's confidentiality. Again, the bottom line with confidentiality is that it is your job to protect the patient's privacy. When you are caring for the patient, you need to make sure that you do all of the precautions that you can to protect the privacy and information of that patient. As I said a couple of slides ago, it's important not to give that information out unless you have permission. Advance directives are an important way that we can know what a patient wants when they are unable to speak for themselves. There are a number of different items that can be used as an advance directive, such as a healthcare power of attorney, a living will, a do not resuscitate order, and a donor registration enrollment form. All of those bits of material let us know where the patient wants their care and how they want their care directed to be. So it's important to follow that and honor it. It is not your decision, it is the patient's decision ultimately. But I also like to tell patients to make sure they are completely aware that the person who they appoint to make decisions for them is what they want, and they're going to follow it. I have seen where a patient put something in an advance directive and the family member they appointed was going to change it, and it could have been done had somebody else not intervened. Hopefully this information was helpful to you. It will make your ability to study healthcare and legal and ethical issues a little easier with a basic rundown, and I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you and have a good day.